Welcome back to another episode of the Life's Ambition podcast. Today we are joined by someone who truly cultivates the word entrepreneur. He's going to share his input on his rise in the sports world to founding the Collective Guild. Without further ado, Justin Ricklefs. Justin, how are we doing today, man?
I'm doing great, Drew. How about you, man? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's awesome now. So, we're in they always say there's 12 seasons to North Carolina. So you have 2 falls, 2 winters, because it'll go from winter to spring and then back to winter again. So right now we're in spring 1, I guess you could say. So enjoying the weather while we can.
Spring 1 is good. Yeah, we had really nice weather in Kansas City the last few days, and then we got hammered with some hail last night. So yeah, it reverted straight into spring 2. So yeah, for sure.
I remember being in Chicago, and there were some times where you have golf ball size hail, and it's just holy cow.
It's crazy. And it's such a weird thing. I'm like, how's the ice just fall from the sky? It's just it's a bizarre it's part of nature.
Bizarre. Yeah, totally bizarre. But I'd love to kind of get into your story because I know it's going to be a great conversation, and I'd love to know how you got from the Kansas City Chiefs to starting your own business called the Collective Guild. Where did creativity start for you? How did it start? Were there people involved that help you kind of get that mindset, or did you always have it?
Oh boy, yeah, that's a great question. I spent 8 total seasons in the front office at the Chiefs. It was basically 5.5 years. Then I left for a couple years, which is a whole separate story. Happy to get into if it's helpful. And then came back. They actually hired me back for a little over 2 years. And it was in that second stint where I was on the sales side, and we called it partnership marketing. So it was us going to corporate partners like a Hy-Vee or a Coca-Cola, or at the time Sprint before T-Mobile bought them, Anheuser-Busch, Community America, those types of companies. And we were selling into those businesses on behalf of the Chiefs, doing corporate partnerships. So we were building marketing programs that would leverage the assets, so to speak, of the Chiefs, whether that was signage or rights to their logo or whatever it might be. And there are a bunch of things that were converging in my own life at that period of time. One was my wife and I have 5 kids. And
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, man. Definitely the coolest thing I've ever done in my whole life is raise those 5 humans with Brooke. And what's interesting though is, I was growing in my own, desire plus dissatisfaction, and not because the job was bad or anything in the actual organization was not awesome, because it really was awesome. But I was growing in my desire to do my own thing, and I can explain what that meant. And what was also true is, I had to try to answer your question, is I was beginning to realize how much I loved the creative process. I wasn't necessarily groomed as a creative in terms of school and undergrad and agency work and those types of things. But I realized through my own creative expression, which primarily was taking the form of writing, that as I wrote, I could connect to myself, number one, because for me, there's a mile long gap between my head and my heart sometimes.
Totally understand that.
Yeah. So writing would be able to, would help me form thoughts, get clear on my feelings, understand what I really believed about a thing. And then in that expression, then there would be some level of connection to another human experience, right?
Yeah.
And so in that though, I was just like, man, that's interesting. I like sharing thoughts, all that. But at a corporate level, or at a more business level, there seemed to be a gap in how companies were communicating their own story in a way that led to a clear understanding of what they were actually selling, a connective experience of what they wanted from their core target audience, target market, and then ultimately a creative manifestation of that belief. And so I didn't have language for all this at the time, but as it was happening, is kind of this mixed up and messy swirl of, hey, our kids are getting older. I want to be around more. I want, have a desire and instinct to take a entrepreneurial type swing. And I think this opportunity exists for my specific way I see the world to serve and benefit a business and help them sell more stuff through being clear, connected, and creative. And so, we didn't jump out of the airplane with a parachute. We built very slowly over probably almost a year, it's 10 months or so. But I pieced together, and so many other people deserve a lot of credit, friends and relationships, and things started to kind of show up that I was like, oh, I could tackle this project and then this project and this project. And we strung together a little bit of a, now the buzzword is side hustle. At the time, I just called it like, hey, there's this like extra income and these projects that I'm involved in that are starting to form into something that could become a business. And so, there are a lot of people involved. Definitely number one, and most importantly, my wife, Brooke, she was in my corner and in my heart the whole time going, hey, is this what you really want? Is this something that you're good at? Can we support our family with it? All that. and then from friends, financial planner, or the counselor we were seeing at the time, good, family members that we trust their opinions and voices in our lives on. So it wasn't this like, oh, it's time to leave and quit your job. It was this a little bit more, thank God, because I'm a pretty like instinctual person by nature and I'm ready to go fast. But thankfully we built it in a little bit of a slower, more methodical way. Does that answer? That was a long answer to your question.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And it's such a hard decision to make of, do I leave something that's stable and I know I can stay at for a long time versus take a gamble on your own business that could have extreme upside potential, but also who knows what's going to happen with it. And so for you to take that
100%.
step is amazing. And I guess I love to kind of like jump back a little bit is,
sure,
were your parents on the creative development side as well? Like, is that kind of also where you first started getting exposed to it? Or was it like teachers, or did you always know you were an entrepreneur like that growing up?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it was very directly expressed in my parents' upbringing or their lives. What's interesting though is as I start to peel the layers back, and I have, especially as I was writing this book that I just released, but I got to this point where I realized, oh my gosh, my mom actually worked at a typesetting place where she, like back in the day when you had to print newspapers or magazines for any distribution to happen, she would literally be the layout and design, and they didn't call it graphic design there, but she definitely has that more on the editing and framing and structure side of creativity for sure. And then her and my dad actually, kind of before that had owned and operated, they called it the horse paper, but they had this horse, it was, think like Facebook Marketplace back, like, but way back in the day with printed paper and just for like horse material. So like trailers and hay and actual horses. And so they had this exchange or this marketplace that was more of a paper, but it had stories. And so my dad would do the interviewing and the stories, and my mom would help do the layout and design. And then they both ended up having more, what I'd consider a kind of traditional corporate careers. And they got divorced. My dad got remarried. And so they kind of had their own thing, but in that there was this essence of like, oh, they're both storytellers. They're both interested in the creative expression of a thing. And even, one step beyond that is they both grew up in an agricultural background. And so
very cool.
Think about how entrepreneurial a farm family is, right? Like you have this massive risk. You take it, you got to literally till the soil and then pray for rain and hope that you have the harvest at the end of the year, right? So you've got this whole long horizon. And so anyhow, there's not like a direct relation to your awesome question. But yeah, there are some semblances of, as I started tracing all this back, I'm like, oh yeah, this stuff's been brewing around in our family for sure.
Yeah, like, because I think about for myself of getting into the environmental world is there were certain things that like teachers in high school or middle school were
Oh yeah,
saying that just like seemed to connect with me more than, let's say, learning about English, um, or
yeah,
math in that sense. I loved math, but I was like, I don't see myself in that role. But there's something about the environmental world that I just kind of found.
that's
And
cool.
my uncle, uh he works for the Forest Service, and he anytime we would talk, it'd just be like some hour-long conversation about how do trees and like farming and all that stuff. And that's when
I
I knew it was
love
like,
that.
all right, this is something I want to do. So I was curious if that was kind of your route. And it sounds like you've always kind of been indoctrinated into it. And I kind of love to know, like, when you were going into college, were you ever unsure about what you wanted to do, or did you kind of have that idea? And then how did you find that opportunity to be on a sports team? Because, and I know throwing a lot at you, but
No,
because
it's
I
great.
find a lot of sports management students, like especially the
Mm,
ones that I
mm,
played on a team with, struggle to find those opportunities. So I was
yeah.
curious how you separated yourself from others.
Oh, well, all of those are awesome questions. So the direct answer to your "did I know what I wanted to do" question is no. I had no idea. Like, I mean, I thought I had an idea, right? Like I went into Mizzou with I'd spent 2 years, my first 2 years in the secondary education department or track program,
Oh, really?
college, and wanted to be a high school baseball coach and teach. You know,
Wow. Yeah.
and frankly, I got 2 years into it, and I was like, I don't know if with no like teachers should make a ton more money than they do, and I had wonderful teachers growing up. So this is not a judgment on that profession, but I was like, I think I want to try to do something where I make more money. That's kind of like the base level, and then
Yeah.
underneath that was this huge avoidance of they had a capstone project. I can't remember exactly the phrase, but after your second year, you had to complete this massive uh, portfolio. And I was like, that sounds terrible. I don't want to do that. And so I went into the counselor's office. And I was like, hey, I still want to graduate in 4 years because I was self-funding or borrowing money to get through college. And I was trying to figure out, and my parents chipped in some, but we didn't come from a ton. And so we were scrapping it and figuring it out. And anyway, the counselor was like, hey, really the only thing you can do at this point is like a super generic degree, or you can go into communications. Some of your classwork will transfer over into the communications department. I'm like, communications,
Oh,
that's interesting. What's that look
yeah.
like? And they're like, well, you have to learn how to communicate with people and learn how corporate communications works. And at the time I had no idea, but that's like a huge chunk of what I do now in my, mid 40s is communications. And so anyway, I switched to communications, and in that there was an organization I was volunteering with called Young Life, which is kind of this Christian based high
Yeah.
school
Yeah.
ministry.
Yeah.
And I went through as a high school kid. Young Life was a big part of my life. Cool young life leader, like this guy who really invested and cared about me. Went to the camps in Colorado and the whole deal. So in college, I was just slightly older, but I was the leader now, or one of the leaders. And they had this retreat at this board member's house. This older guy named Clyde, and it was like 20 minutes from campus. But his house, I was just like, whoa, this dude lives like on a lake, and he's got this cool cigar room, and he's got this big wine closet, and then he's got he's got all these pictures of he would call them friends, but they're his colleagues and him with people like Roy Williams when he was at KU, or Bob Stoops when he was at University of Oklahoma, or Norm
That's
Stewart, who was the
awesome.
Mizzou head coach. And I was like, what's this dude do? Like, I just kind of knew him as Clyde, the Young Life board guy, right?
Yeah.
And so I start to dig in, and I'm like, oh, this bro owns Learfield Communications and Learfield Sports, which has become this really massive organization. But at the time, it was a big organization, but not as big as it was or is today.
Wow.
Anyway, all that to say, I was like fascinated by Clyde. And and what was amazing about him is he was definitely, wealthy and important and had a big job and owned the school company and all that stuff. And I'm just this
Hmm.
like 20-year-old punk kid, right? And I just asked him all these questions. And what was so cool is Clyde has this gift of, he flipped everything back around. And so then he's asking me questions and asking me about my, at the time, fiance, Brooke, who's now my wife, and about my family and about what I want to do with my life. And I'm like, this guy really cares about me.
That's awesome.
And so anyhow, I was hell bent in that moment to work for him. And it took about 6 months, but I ended up, meeting the person who runs the Mizzou property. And I was like, dude, I'll do anything. I'll volunteer. I'll intern. I will do anything. I want to break into this thing.
Yeah.
And ultimately, ended up having some good fortune and some doors opened up that I got to walk through. And so my first job, I was like 22, making like low $20,000 a year plus commission. We had a kid.
Wow.
And I felt like I was a millionaire, right? I was like, I've got this job at my alma mater. I get to like work the football games and the basketball games and all this stuff. And what I'd say to those sports management degree students now is, I mean, obviously that industry has exploded over the last couple of decades. But what's still true is it's still a very relational space. And so I'd encourage, there's this temptation to, we'll just fire off these resumes and hope something good happens. But the problem is, like, those jobs are so, well, I don't know, like in demand or popular, so to speak. And so if you don't have a connection somehow to the humans making the decisions, and that's a tough pill to swallow sometimes, because it still is, and it's not a like who in a power sense, but it is a, hey, how can you get connected to these people on LinkedIn? How can you comment on their posts? Like, you've got to build some awareness of who you are, what value you add. And what doesn't work is people who are like, well, I'm really passionate about the Indiana Pacers or the Chicago Bulls or the whatever, like the Seattle Kraken. And because those organizations don't need people who are passionate about their sport. That's what their fans do, right? Yeah. They need people who come in and can add value and be additive and be someone who can increase the effectiveness of the organization. And so all that to say, for me, I didn't know any of that at the time, but I thankfully just had access to people who were making those decisions. And I kept asking, like, hey, can I show up on Saturday and help deliver the game day programs? Can I like lug the rally towels around the stands and hand them out? Like, of course I had an agenda, but I came in at it with like, hey, I want to help. I want to be part of it. I want to give and add value. And so anyway, that's a long-winded soapbox about getting hired in the sports industry.
No, but I really appreciate you explaining that in depth, because I feel like it's really important with the sports industry, with how many people want to be involved with it, because everyone's a sports fan to 100%. Some degree. And there's only so many sports teams that you can work with, and there's only so many positions within those entities. And so 100%. To be able to like start at the bottom of even just like, hey, can I volunteer? Just get your name out there. And then eventually you might run into someone of X caliber and they're like, hey, like, appreciate what you do. Like, can you explain to me? And then you tell them, and then maybe that turns into a connection from there. So I think that's awesome on how you started. And I got to ask you real quick, because one of my best friends went to Mizzou. Just how much of a rivalry is it between you guys and I want to say it's either Kansas or Kentucky?
Yeah. No, it's Kansas. No, definitely 100% Kansas. Yeah, 100% Kansas. I mean, it technically, I can't remember the year that Mizzou went to the SEC. I should know that. I think it was in the mid 2010s or so. But before that, there was this long standing. I mean, there's like some state rivalry stuff that's like way back in the day that was some pretty ugly. Back in the Civil War days, where there were some pretty ugly kind of state rivalries between Kansas and Missouri. But then the universities themselves, I mean, as silly as, here's one example that's a funny kind of anecdote. Norm Stewart was the Mizzou men's basketball coach for a long time. I mean, 30 years or so probably. And everybody loved Norm. but he would refuse. And this is back in the day where they didn't fly on private jets everywhere. They like literally rode buses and stuff. And so they would leave Columbia on the bus. They would stop in Kansas City and eat or gas up or whatever. They'd then drive to Lawrence. They'd play the game. Most of the time lose, by the way. We always got whipped by KU in hoops. But then he would refuse to spend any money in the state of Kansas. And so they wouldn't be like, yeah. And then so they get back in the bus, they drive back to Kansas City, and they like eat dinner in Kansas City and then drive to Columbia. So it's like, as petty as it is, that's some of the rivalry. And then the football teams played each other at Arrowhead, and it was this huge thing. And then, yeah, Mizzou left to go to the SEC, and for many years, almost a decade, there was like this kind of cold shoulder divorce moment where nobody talked to each other. But they're still pissed at each other. And then now over the last 3 or 4 years, they've started to play each other again in hoops and in football and women's hoops and all the stuff. And it's been fun. Cause yeah, it's probably less like volatile and intense. But there's still this kind of deep-seated rivalry between the two organizations, or two universities for sure.
That's what it sounds like. And I got to ask, like, so you got the position to be able to work with Mizzou for a little bit. Did you move your way up through the university? Then was it a transition to Kansas City? Or what were kind of those next steps for yourself? And because only making $20,000 a year,
yeah,
obviously, like, you know, as a college student,
that's more
bro. Yeah, it's a long time. That's more than what most people make. So, what were kind of like the next steps in your head, and how did you kind of get to some of the big entities? And was it like working for a college, like, especially like a school like Mizzou? What was it like working for them?
Oh, it was so awesome. Like it really was. I was 22. I worked there for 3 years. So I was 22 to 25 ish. And yeah, like ultimately they put me in a sales role. And so I was able to go get some commission and, you know, get some deals done that helped grow the income and things like that. So that part was, began to take care of itself when performance came. But yeah, like there's still that crew I met there is still some of my closest professional friends. There's a guy named Will Patterson who lives down the street, and we're still friends.
That's awesome.
Laird Veach was my first boss, and he's the athletic director now at Mizzou. And he went all sorts of places, Memphis and K-State and back to Mizzou and different things. There's a guy named Andrew Wheeler who's still in the business. There's a guy named Jeff Schultz who's still in the business. There's a guy named Brandon Miller who's running a big group for a big, huge media company in Chicago. All that to say, like those relationships formed at such a really cool age that that was the reward. And yes, like the working at the time we were at the Hearns Center, like the old arena before they built the new arena. And the work in the football games and having, you know, wearing the Nike polo with the Mizzou logo and being, you know, having the all access badge you could get wherever you needed to get to
That's
work.
Awesome.
Like for sure was really cool. Really, really cool. And actually the promotion for me came when they actually moved me and our family to Memphis. And I got like the associate general manager was the title. So it's kind of the number 2 role at the University of Memphis when Coach Calipari was there. And they were definitely doing NIL deals before it was legal. Because like Derrick Rose is like rolling around in a Range Rover.
It's tuition money.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So you'd roll up into like the athletic department, and I'm, you know, cruising in my like 1993 Chevy Blazer, I was like $55,000 a year at that point or whatever, like killing it. And then you see these college kids like get out of G-Wagons and stuff. It's like, oh, okay, this is a different deal.
Humbling, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so I was there we were in Memphis for a little over 2 years. And that's when we had our third daughter. And, you know, I, at that point had 5, almost 6 years of experience in the sports business. And there was an opening at the Chiefs in their sponsorship sales group, and had an interview and ended up getting that crack on the NFL side. And yeah, it was a really special deal because that was kind of my hometown team growing up. Right. And so to be able to move home. We had 3 kids, take this cool job. It was a really special time for sure.
Yeah, I gotta ask, like with colleges, were you exposed to the recruiting aspect at all? Like it's NIL, but it's not necessarily NIL money that these kids are being thrown. It's like, hey, like we'll give you these incentives to come to our school. Were you exposed to that world at all?
Not really. I mean, there's a pretty distinct group, and especially on the NFL or MLB side, like the sports program itself. So the athletic trainers and the coaches and the recruiting folks, and certainly the players, and then college doesn't call it a front office, but more on the administration side. It's a pretty distinct divide, and those things cross every now and then. But yeah, those are I didn't at least have much exposure to the recruiting side, other than seeing some of these dudes getting out of cars that I was like, oh damn.
I gotcha. So in the front office, then when you got to Kansas, like the Chiefs,
Yeah.
what was that experience like? Was it just chaotic? Like I'm assuming during like draft time and all that stuff, things get absolutely insane. Like what's kind of the atmosphere around there? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's grown a lot. Obviously, I started in 2008, and then left in 2017. Okay, and then had a couple years in between there where I wasn't there.
So they were doing okay then.
Yeah. We weren't like they didn't go on the Super Bowl run until after I left. I left a month before they drafted Mahomes, which is
just so tough
career timing. Yeah. But yeah, even though now they're a much bigger front office, they're still relatively not huge businesses. So that's the interesting kind of misconception, is you think it's this like massive organization like a Garmin or H&R Block or whatever. And yeah. Again, there's now some good size to these different clubs or organizations. But at the time, there were less than 100 people that worked in the front office. Again, not the football side, not how many players are there and trainers and all that, but like the actual
really less than 100.
Yeah. Now, again, I don't know what they are now. My guess is they've doubled that, because it's just it's a different deal now with the media, everything that's grown around it on the social side. But that being said, it was just that, yeah, like there were definitely some seasons where it was pretty intense, right? Like football season itself is pretty intense, because you've got your work week, and then you're hosting 80,000 people on a Sunday. And so that Sunday is a full day, and you've got clients coming to the game. And so you're, wearing a full suit and you're doing the thing, and you're hosting people and making sure that they have a great experience. And then Monday comes and you're like in the sales meeting at, 9 a.m. on Monday morning or whatever. So the season itself definitely had some intensity to it. But then to your point, the NFL is such a year-round business now. Like free agency is a thing, the draft is a thing, when the players come for OTAs, when you've got training camp. So you have these kind of tentpole moments throughout the year that definitely had for us some spikes in activity of when we got to either host clients or do different things like that. So it was great experience though, man. Like the I'd say the experience and the skills developed were for sure really beneficial. But again, the through line is these relationships that you form both internally and then also with these, wonderful clients that we got to work alongside. Those really carried just such awesome career weight moving forward for sure.
Well, and the clients I'm sure you guys are working with are also corporate giants in a sense, because you're working probably with like Anheuser-Busch and like all these high entity product. Like how do you guys keep those relationships? How do you guys decide whether to move on? Because I'm thinking that's kind of what you guys were in charge of in a sense, was establishing those relationships and holding on to them. Because you guys said you moved from, what was it? It was something to Sprint, right? Or was it Sprint to something?
Yeah, Sprint Sprint was before T-Mobile bought. They're still now with T-Mobile, but yes, Sprint was the client that we worked with. But yeah, we actually transformed quite a few of those. We used to call them categories. So you'd have like an insurance partner and an automobile partner and a banking partner and a soda partner and a beer partner, all that, right? And so we learned so much from the current president. Mark Donovan is so smart, and he came in and helped us think about how to. A phrase he used to use a lot was like fewer, longer, deeper. So fewer partners, longer terms, deeper integration between the businesses.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting philosophy because before he arrived, the Chiefs had, I don't know the exact number, but let's call it 130 clients on the corporate partnership side.
130? Holy
It was a
cow.
lot. And it was a lot of these like local, and again, nothing bad with local, but it's like these smaller local deals of like 20 grand, 30 grand, 40 grand, whatever.
Yeah.
And he helped us reshape like the average deal size. And they're now, I'm sure, much bigger than this. But we were then asked to go build programs that had some measurable marketing value associated with them and start at six figures. And so we went from 130 down to like 25 in 1 year. And they believed in the longer term model. So we actually went down in revenue for a couple years before it then went like, took this huge hockey stick curve back up. And we started clipping like 200 grand deals, 400 grand deals, $1 million. We had our first $1 million deal. And so those programs just got more integrated into the business and therefore more valuable between the two companies. And yeah, I learned a ton from him and the rest of the team there on how to think about value-based selling, how to have pricing integrity, how to grow a measurable impact from these different programs. And yeah, it was a really fascinating time. And actually, general Chiefs fans have no clue, and maybe shouldn't. I don't know. I don't know if they even care. But the front office, like when Clark, who's the chairman and CEO, and then Mark, who's the president, when they started to transform the business side, it changed. I mean, it was before they hired Andy Reid and got Mahomes and all that stuff. The business started to really perform and get healthy, and created a ton of momentum for the broader organization and certainly the football team. It's super cool. It's a really cool case study in leadership and in mindset and in methodology, because at the time the team was okay, but not great, and they still held this expectation of excellence, which was challenging to receive. But once we started to believe it and see it work, it was like, oh man, this is really fascinating stuff.
Were you guys ever concerned about your relationship with like the consumers when you guys were downsizing all of these entities that you guys were working with, of like, oh, are people going to think that we're just doing a whole rebranding? And, obviously people find it hard with change. And were you guys ever nervous about that at all?
Oh yeah. There were some tough conversations, especially with, let's say local auto manufacturer or something like, or local restaurant. That's a better example. Yeah. Who's been paying, for them a good chunk of their budget, and they've been investing, so to speak, in the team. And then we come in and say, hey, you got to, new day, got to kind of get it to this level. We can help you get it to this level over time, whatever. But they just didn't have, some of them didn't have the wherewithal or the bandwidth to get there no matter what. And so, yeah, those are tricky conversations for sure. But I do think in that simplifying and paring down, which is something we've done in our own business over the last couple of years, is getting tighter and more focused on the core who are actually going to move your business forward in a big accelerant way. Those are tough conversations, but they're really necessary ones. And so, yeah, like there was some pain in the process for sure, but that payoff was very evident when it started to roll in. And then you start to compound momentum because you've got the confidence that you've done it before.
And how do you identify those metrics of, hey, we're trying to get to here in the long term, in those 4 years? We need to identify or reach out to clients that are at like this threshold and like maybe have this kind of audience and can like support this. Like, were you
Yeah.
guys playing around of like, oh, we need to sell auto insurance
Yep.
or like even
Yep.
beers or anything like that at this
Yep.
rate to get to here in a few years? How do you guys identify those metrics to get you guys where you need to be?
Yeah, I'm fuzzy on the specifics at this point, but I remember the NFL, and I know the NBA and WNBA and NWSL. Like I know all leagues are have come a long way in their insights departments, but I remember there used to be this report we would get, and it would be a survey of all 32 teams, and it would show season ticket revenue, which that wasn't our group, my group, suite revenue, which wasn't my group, but then it would show the corporate partnership revenue, which was my group.
Hmm.
And we were, honestly, I think, again, this is like as Mark was coming in, and so
Yeah.
this changed pretty quick, but I think we were 30 or 31. We were real low. And there was this kind of expectation of like, yeah, but we're a small market and we're not Philly or New York or Chicago or whatever. It's like, it's Kansas City. It's fine. Like 31 is better than not being on the list at all. Right. Nobody said that, but that was kind of like it was just like, this is good enough. But then in that 3 to 4 year stretch, when he really challenged us to rethink and rebuild, I have 15 in my mind. It might have been 17, but we jumped all the way up to like middle of the pack. And so then we were competing with the like Atlantas and Chicago's. We weren't the,
That's awesome.
The huge market clubs at that point. I think the Chiefs have just continued to accelerate their position in that category.
Yeah.
But so there was like, hey, we got to get out of the cellar, right? Like, let's get to the middle of the tier. So that was like business goal. And then business strategy was, okay, here are the top 40 categories. And at the time it was like, who's your technology partner? Who's your, wireless provider, your auto dealer, your soda dealer, your soda provider, all that stuff. And then we just benchmarked, do we have a client in that category? If not, here are the top 10 clients. Let's freaking go get them.
That is super cool.
Hammering phones and prospecting and emails. And then if we do have one, how long are we under contract, and what's the delta between our average deal size, our current deal size, and what the expectation is for us to get to a certain spot. And so there were a couple examples where we shifted from Chevy to Ford. We shifted from Price Chopper to Hy-Vee. And then there were a lot of other examples where we didn't have a client in the category, so we went and figured it out and got there eventually. Didn't happen overnight. Or we helped somebody graduate. I think Sprint was an example of that, where they were underperforming to the new expectation, but then we got them there over time with some bigger
interesting
value increases. So yeah, it's kind of a mix of all that stuff.
And it's crazy for me to think about, like, you're getting Sprint, like a very known entity, to where they need to be. So it's just kind of cool to see how like you guys are complementing these big industries and then how they're complementing you guys as well. And I'd love to ask, because you talked about how when the new president came in, he challenged you guys and got you guys to where you are today, in a sense. Like, I know you're not there, but to where the Kansas City Chiefs are today. What do you contribute to like the fan base and the marketing, to the players and the coaches and everything, versus the front office and what they can do? Do you think it's like a 50-50 split? And obviously I don't want to create any bad terms with both sides, but what do you contribute to both sides?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. It's a great question. Ultimately, Chiefs for sure. It's where I live. It's our hometown, and it's where I worked. And so I've got like an acute understanding of, as Mitch Holtis, the voice of the Chiefs, calls it, the Chiefs Kingdom, right? It's not just like Kansas City, but it's the whole state of Kansas, the whole state of Missouri, lots of Iowa, lots of Nebraska, lots of Oklahoma and Arkansas, right? So there's this 6-state footprint, and ultimately it's all in service to those because those fans are also the consumer. So like
Yeah.
none of this exists without attention and affinity. So those two things, attention and affinity. So people
Hmm.
watching on TV is the number one source of revenue for that league. And then people coming to the games, people buying the stuff, people, engaging on social media, right? So everything's aimed at how do we provide, it's an entertainment business at the end of the day. So how do
Yeah.
we provide enough entertainment and engagement for us to drive attention and affinity? And because if they love our thing, we then have growing things to offer and therefore
Hmm.
sell. And so what I'd say is I don't know what the breakdown is. None of it happens without the right actual product, which is the
Yeah.
football team, right? Or the baseball team or the women's soccer team or the Olympics, whatever the thing is. None of it matters ultimately if that product is terrible for a long period of time. You can kind of ebb and flow a little bit, right? But you're from Chicago, so you saw this. Like the Bears weren't that great for a long stretch, and then last
Totally.
fall they were great, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, the heartbeat of Chicago is back.
Hmm.
And so anyway, but what I think the business side or the front office side now, especially back to the conversations about college, it's such a complicated landscape now because media has changed, the revenue models have changed, the player, especially in the college deal, the player deals have changed.
Yeah.
And so there's now all this complexity of, yes, you got to go play football or whatever sport. But to get it to that point, you got to build the right team. You got to pay for the right team. You got to finance the stadium in the right way. You got to raise corporate sponsorship. So it's a very complicated business now. And so, yeah, none of it happens without the fans or the product. But I think there's this huge engine that's developing around how do these athletic departments, these front offices, how do these honestly other entities like agencies and media partners and corporate partners, how do they help change, continue forward progress and momentum. It is a complicated but really interesting conversation for sure.
Which, I mean, I think it's absolutely amazing that you're able to be part of that. And it sounds like there was a lot of like stressful times that were brought upon you or
Oh
relationships
yeah.
that you had to build. What would you say is probably the biggest thing when you first pretty much started at Mizzou, went to Kansas City, and then started your own business? What would you say is the biggest thing that you learned in that stretch?
Oh man, it's hard to pare it down into one. But I've tried to. There's this phrase that we've used a lot in our business. We call it, we say give a damn, and I think what is true is that especially over the long haul, if you can show up and care for someone other than yourself, it's a really huge competitive advantage for you in your career. And there's evidence all over the place of how disinterested and engaged employees are in their corporation. There's all sorts of terms like quiet quitting and Sunday scaries and all this stuff, right? But the reality is that 81% of employees dread Monday morning. And so that leaves 19% who don't dread Monday and who can bring effort and attitude into these places of work that display this willingness to give a damn and
Yeah.
to go the extra mile. I mean, there's a lot of ways to describe it.
Isn't
But
that weird to think in a sense too, that it's just something as simple as just showing up, like what you're saying?
yeah, and I mean, like the evidence, it's all over the place, right? Like you go into a local restaurant or you go deal with a local service provider of some sort. I mean, my wife and I were talking about this last night. We've got a bathroom remodel project we're trying to figure out, and
Oh,
we're
those are
trying,
complicated.
yeah, we're
My
trying to get a
parents did theirs
quote.
not long ago.
Yeah, we're trying to get a quote on a plumber, like, and we had one that we thought was really great. My wife's left them three. The guy came out. He was awesome. And he was like, hey, somebody from the office will be in touch with a quote. She's called them 3 times to get a quote and they won't call back. It's just like,
Really?
this
Oh,
isn't that freaking hard. Like, we
yeah.
make it complicated, but most of the time it's these simple behaviors and practices that actually are the things that move the needle and lead to like sticky client relationships and increased revenue. It's crazy stuff.
Oh, yeah. It sounds like crazy stuff. And I got to ask you, like, how did you come up with the name of Guild Collective? Because that's kind of like your transition and what you kind of learned throughout the time where you are today. How'd you come up with the name of it? And like, what is it all about for people that don't know?
Yeah, it's the name Guild came to me. We're living in this old house that was built in the 1860s, and we had this fire pit to the outside and to the left of the house. And I'm a man, right? So I can only speak from my experience. But as men, especially as we get older and life gets more complicated and we have kids and jobs and mortgages and stuff, we generally don't do a great job of maintaining friendship. We drift with friendship and it becomes a little more surfacey or shallow. And so I was committed to, I'm like, I don't really want that to happen to me. I'd seen some of that stuff happen to some older guys I knew. And we just formed this really loose group of guys who would hang out once a month around a fire. And at the time we like smoked cigars and drank whiskey and would just be together and tell stories and be together. And so because I'm kind of a branding dork, after we met 2 or 3 times, I was like, oh, this has there's something here. There's some essence in this that I want to capture. And so I was like just searching for like hey, what would feel like kind of an old school vibe, but like a really interesting way to describe this group. And so the first word that came to my mind there was, oh, we can just call this the Guild. And it's like this, secret society, so to speak, of like these invite only times where you get to come to this fire. And so all that to say, I was still working at the Chiefs there. I was doing that stuff and we were having these little fire pit nights. And then as the business started to kind of form in my brain and my body, I was like, oh, I think it's actually could be an amazing, Guild for me harkens back to like these simpler times, these older times, these moments when the skill really mattered and the skill was developed in community or with like-minded people. And so, yeah, Guild was formed out of that belief of, hey, could we become a collective of creatives that are really deliberate about telling strategic stories that help people grow their companies. And so, yeah, there's a deeper dive, but that's the fly through of where Guild was born.
That's awesome. And like for people that are trying to have that creative side or kind of explore their own entrepreneur mindset, what would you recommend to them kind of getting into creating their own business or like scaling something up? Because it can be very hard once you're first starting out to get your name out there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think every situation is different, of course, and everybody's got their own life context. There's part of me that wishes I would have started at your age. Like, I just like there's this huge, for sure, aversion and fear and anxiety about it, and it is hard and it's tricky and there's some crazy stuff you got to deal with. But I had much more at risk when I was 36 starting my company instead of 26. That being said, grateful for all the experience. It all mattered, of course. But I think there are lots of ways today. If you've got that entrepreneurial drive, there are lots of ways when the stakes are as low as possible. That's a wonderful time to take the leap. And what's also true is it's definitely not for everybody. And there are wonderful benefits to. I kind of get annoyed by people who say they like tell their team to think like an owner, and it's like they don't want to. That they never will. And they shouldn't have to. Like, you're the owner. Like, you think like the owner. Yeah, you want to encourage them to be excellent and mindful and aware and, cost conscious and all that stuff. But like, not everybody does think like an owner, and they shouldn't feel bad about that. And so I think there's this, maybe glorification of entrepreneurship, that it's like some utopia, and there's part of it that's like amazing, of course, and
Yeah.
it's not for everybody. And so I think to have honest conversations about like, what do you actually really want? There are people I know in this city who are quote unquote employees who make way more money and have way more flexibility than I have. And they love the stability of 2 weeks and 401ks and vacations and all that stuff, right? And so it's not for everybody, is what I'd say. But it is, if you want to choose the path of building your own thing, especially in 2026, my gosh, there's a million ways you could do it that are moderately low risk. And the true worst case scenario is generally not going to happen. But if you do play it all the way out and you're like, man, we gave it a shot, we borrowed a bunch of money or lost a bunch of money, and now I owe a bunch of money and I'm embarrassed because it didn't work. That's a really great story to tell your next employer to be like, dude, I gave it a shot. It didn't work. Will you hire me back? I think the fear is usually much bigger than the reality of what could happen. And so anyway, and what's true is there are some amazing, like, normal jobs that you don't have to deal with some of the craziness of the entrepreneurial journey.
And, I know you said for yourself, you rather wish you started at 26 versus 36. Do you think that stems from a lot of like responsibilities that you have now? You have 5 kids, so you want to make sure they're taken care of. You have a family, and then who knows what life is kind of pulling you to different directions. So you want to make sure your foundation is all good before taking a big leap into something else. Would you say that's probably the big thing?
Yes. How I describe it, though, for me personally, is the reason I wish I would have started sooner is because the first 5 years are just kind of brutal regardless. It's just hard. Like and even if you're making money, you're learning so much about yourself that is honestly pretty difficult stuff to wrestle with, because there's no, like, you can't blame the boss, you can't blame the client. There's nowhere to look except internal, and you're like, gosh, I am an anxious mess. I don't sleep very well. I am making dumb decisions here. Like, you just have that period where it's like, it's pretty raw and weird. And so I would have rather gotten that out earlier than later. I'm really grateful. Like, it happened the way it needed to happen. But what I'd say is, though, like, for me is and this is why I started our business, which was like, I want more ability to impact my time. I want to work from home when I want to work from home. I want to have some agency and autonomy over, can we grow the heck out of this thing, or can we simplify it and slow it down? And so to have the healthy, grounded parts of control, not in a weird way, but in a way that you've got influence and you can direct, like, hey, where's this boat going to go on the ocean? Feels really good. And I like the ability to, especially with my, simplified life, is I want to have more time with my wife and with our kids and travel to places that we find are interesting. And that those things are a little bit more difficult, not impossible, but a little bit more difficult to do if you don't have the ability to influence your time. And that's, 45-year-old me is like, man, the time just flies by, and I want to be able to be present to it as much as possible. And I think that having an ability to design how you work is such an awesome benefit to entrepreneurship, but it does take some hard lumps to get there for sure.
Like, my dad, he always told, like, me and my brothers to grind things out early on in your career, get ahead as far as you can.
Oh, yeah.
And then you can kind of reap the benefits when you have kids. And that's where you talk about how then you have that flexibility to kind of do what you want and
totally
be able to enjoy the different things. And so that's what I think is great about the messaging that you're saying here. And I love to kind of like ask you, when did you decide to do a book? Like, that's obviously a really cool journey to do in itself. And I'm sure you learned a lot about yourself. And I know we mentioned at the beginning that when you were writing, that's kind of when you were learning the most. And so I love to kind of hear about why did you start, or why did you want to write a book?
Yeah. Drew, you're a great question asker, man. I appreciate your curiosity. Yeah, the book was like a, practically speaking, like a 9-month project, but it was this like decade long journey of collecting experiences, remembering stories, learning lessons the hard way, screwing stuff up, doing stuff great, right? It was all this kind of messy mix of my professional journey. And it came up first for us. I'd been talking about writing a book for years, and my wife, who bless her, her voice in my life is so good. And we were in Colorado last February, just the two of us, and we were having dinner and we were talking, just kind of this crappy saloon in the middle of the mountains, and we were having burgers and French fries or salads or something. And we were literally scribbling on napkins, like stuff that was just like dreams, right? Like stuff we want to do and places we
Yeah.
want to go. The stuff you do when you're kind of away. And I wrote on that napkin, "It's time to write the book." And it took a couple twists and turns, but what came was, hey, we want to do a project that's aligned with how Guild makes money and the clients we serve. And Guild is a very organizational focused service. So we help brands find their heartbeat. So we're working with leaders, but the business is buying it. But what's also true is like it always does start with the leadership team themselves, him or her, them and they, right? Like the group who makes up the leadership team. And so give a damn has been this phrase that we've used for many years. And it was this really interesting blend of like, sit your butt in the seat, do the work, be disciplined about it. And what was so true and really hard to explain at times is like, there are these like mystery drops or mystery downloads from spirit or source or energy, however you want to describe that. For me, I think it's a God thing. But I was available, and so I was sitting in my seat doing the work, and then there would be these like these stories that would come to my mind. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the perfect one for this perfect time. And so I wrote the book. To your point, I wrote it for me. I wrote it because I wanted to know, what does it take to give a damn? What is a heart posture towards believing that care can be a competitive advantage for a company? And so like that alone was why I did the work. And then of course I wanted to help people. I wanted to inspire people. I wanted to help people live a better life, make more money, build better teams, all that. And I'm hopeful that will happen. But for me, the real project was, yeah, to your point, that connection between head and heart of like, all right, what do I actually believe and think about this topic? And it was cool how stuff in really mysterious ways would show up as I was consistent and did the work.
That's awesome. I mean, to be able to write a book is already so hard in itself because it puts you in a vulnerable position. And I kind of want to leave you with one question.
Yeah.
You know, you've taken on like all these entrepreneur tasks and you've created a life for yourself and you've built your own image and you create all these relationships. What would you say you're most grateful for and throughout all your experiences, whether that's the good or the bad?
I'm stuttering and stammering a little bit because I want to be as clear as I can on your awesome question, which is, I mean, truly, dude, like the relationships are the reward. They really are. And you've helped me reflect back even on my time at Mizzou and Memphis and the Chiefs and even the parts of the journey we didn't talk about, and then starting Guild and my wife and our 5 kids and my family, my mom and dad. Like the relationships are the reward. And I think that's what you're helping me see in this conversation is, yeah, like you want to go make more money and buy cooler things and all that stuff. But like last night we had the hailstorm in Kansas City, and our youngest daughter was at volleyball practice. I was getting my hair cut about 15 minutes away. And when crap hits the fan, you don't really care like what the client list looks like. Yeah. I was like, I'm coming home. And Brooke was like, I'm going to get Henley. and like everybody's meeting at the house, like get in the basement because there's a tornado siren going off, right? And so like those are the relationships, like when crap literally does hit the fan and when wonderful things are happening, it's like, who do you want to be around and who do you want to be? And so that's it, man. That's it. Like, how do you order a life in a way that you can spend time with the people who you actually love and who actually know and love you? And the rest of it's like, yeah, it's important and interesting and all that stuff, but like those relationships are the reward.
That's awesome. And I think it's great that you have that kind of support system because it's only helped you to get where you are today. And I can't thank you
100%.
enough for wanting to do the episode today, Justin. It does mean a lot. And I'm glad that we're able to kind of bring out your entire story and you're able to reflect on some different things that you hadn't thought about in a while.
Bro, you're the next Tim Ferriss or Rich Roll, man. You're really talented, and your curiosity. I hope you continue to foster that in your life because it will carry you lots of places. And I really appreciate your time today, my friend.
Thanks, Justin. Hey, everyone. Want to take a quick second and say thank you to whoever listened to the episode today. I really do appreciate it, and it means a lot. If you did like the episode, make sure to give it a like or 5-star rating depending on what platform you are listening to. And if you really want to support the show, check out our website or Patreon link below. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next episode.